At our family reunion, my brother mocked my government job. 10 minutes later, a sterile corridor formed, and Air Force One landed nearby. This is a fictional story, inspired by real emotions. All characters, events, and details are imagined for storytelling purposes only.
I was hiding in Aunt Connie's kitchen, pretending to be deeply fascinated by a plastic spoon I'd already washed twice, when my brother's voice cut through the backyard like it always did. Loud, casual, a little too pleased with itself. "Greer," Derek called, like he was summoning a waitress. "You still doing that cute little government job?" I kept my eyes on the spoon. It was spotless. I scrubbed anyway. Behind him, someone laughed. It wasn't even a big laugh, just that small, social laugh people do when they want to stay on the right side of the room. Mom's voice followed, soft and polished, the way she could make anything sound like kindness. "At least she's stable," Linda said. "You know how those jobs are, benefits and boredom." The way she said it, you'd think I spent my days stamping forms in a basement and arguing with printers. I didn't turn around. I didn't correct him. That was the rule in my family. If you wanted peace, you let Derek narrate your life. I heard my cousin Marcy add, "At least she's not complicated." That word landed exactly where it was meant to. Complicated. Like I was a woman past her expiration date. Like my life was a half-finished recipe nobody wanted to eat. Derek leaned into it because, of course he did. "She's basically an office girl with a badge," he said. "Paperwork patriot." More laughter. A few forks clinked against paper plates. Someone yelled that the burgers were ready. And I stood there, with wet hands and a clean spoon, listening to the same old story being told about me like it was a family tradition. I understood the game. In this house, the loudest person got to be right. The quiet person got assigned a role. I was 26 years old, and somehow still the punchline. I didn't correct him. I didn't correct Mom either, even though the word stable in her mouth always meant small. I dried my hands slowly, the way you do when you're buying yourself time to swallow something sharp. Through the kitchen window, I could see the reunion spread across the backyard. Folding chairs, a wobbly cornhole set, potato salad sweating in a bowl, Derek holding court like he owned the air. He looked good today. He always did. He'd learned early that confidence was a costume you could wear until people stopped questioning it. He was in the middle of a story about a business deal, using words like leverage and upside and passive income, and everyone was nodding like he was delivering scripture. I watched him and felt that familiar, dull pressure behind my ribs. Not anger, not even sadness. More like a tired kind of disbelief that the same people who raised me still didn't know me at all. I turned back to the sink, just to have something to do with my hands. And that's when I noticed it. The wind. It shifted. Not in a poetic way, in a practical way. The kind you feel on your skin before you register it in your brain. The backyard flags, the cheap little ones Aunt Connie stuck in the flower bed, fluttered in a different direction. I caught myself listening, the way I always did without meaning to. Distant traffic. A low hum that didn't belong to the neighborhood. "That's not normal traffic for a Saturday," I murmured, not realizing I'd said it out loud. Aunt Connie's friend, a woman named Janice, looked at me like I'd announced the weather. "Huh?" she said. I just nodded and kept rinsing. Then my phone vibrated in my back pocket. One buzz, then another. I didn't reach for it right away. That's the funny thing about habits. Your body knows what matters before your mind admits it. I pulled the phone out and glanced down. No dramatic graphics, no movie-style code. Just 3 lines that made my stomach tighten in a way I couldn't fake. TFR, pending. Advance arriving. Nearest qualified, Greer. I stared at the screen long enough for the words to settle into place. My hands were still wet. A drop of water slid off my wrist and onto the tile. For a second, the kitchen felt too small, too normal, too full of mayonnaise and laughter. I wasn't supposed to be working today. I was supposed to be invisible. I looked back out the window. Derek was still smiling, still talking, still enjoying the version of me he'd invented. Mom was still watching him like he was the sun. And in that moment, something in me went very calm. Not brave, not proud, just calm, like a switch had flipped. I'm telling you this because what happened next wasn't heroic. It was procedural, and it broke my family's favorite story about me. I didn't correct him, not because I was afraid, because in 10 minutes, someone else would. Loudly.
If your family ever reduced your life to a joke, would you stay quiet or let reality answer for you?
I slid my phone back into my pocket like it hadn't just rewritten the entire afternoon. I took one slow breath, then another, and walked out of the kitchen with the same clean spoon still in my hand, because I honestly did not know what else to do with it. The backyard was loud, in that comfortable, careless way families get when they assume nothing serious can touch them. Derek was sitting at the center of a half-circle of folding chairs, one ankle crossed over his knee, talking like the world owed him a microphone. "So the guy tells me, Derek, you're the only one I trust with this," he said, tapping his chest. People nodded. Uncle Walt sat off to the side with a paper plate, chewing slowly, watching everything like he'd learned a long time ago that the loudest person is usually the least important. I kept my face neutral and stepped toward the table to set the spoon down. Derek's eyes caught me immediately. He smiled like a cat, spotting a mouse that had wandered back into the room. "There she is," he said. "Our little government hero." He leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was about to share something affectionate. "Greer's married to her pension," he announced. A few people laughed, not a cruel laugh, but the kind that still stings because it's easy. "She brings spreadsheets to a barbecue," he added, and this time the laugh was bigger. Someone clapped once, like Derek had landed a punchline worth applause. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't say anything. I didn't correct him. In my family, silence was treated like agreement. If you stayed quiet long enough, people stopped hearing your side of the story. Eventually, they stopped imagining you had one. Mom was standing near the cooler, holding a stack of napkins like she was the manager of a small event. She watched Derek with that soft smile she saved for him, the one that made him feel like he could do no wrong. Then she turned to me and delivered her line. Sweet as pie and twice as sharp. "Greer just isn't leadership material like you, Derek," she said, as if she was complimenting both of us. Derek spread his hands modestly. "I mean, somebody has to lead," he said. I was about to step away when Aunt Connie's friend Janice waved me over. "Honey, can you clear those plates?" she asked, already turning away like it was decided. I nodded and started gathering paper plates and plastic cups, while Derek stayed seated, still talking about brand deals and market timing. My cousin Marcy leaned in close to me and whispered, "Can you check the thermostat inside? It's getting warm, and you know government people love rules." She giggled at her own joke. I walked into the house and adjusted the thermostat without changing it, because it was already set to 72, and came back out with the same calm face. Derek was still going. "She's got benefits and boredom," he said again, like it was the official job description. "Office girl with a badge." He mimicked my voice then, pitching it lower and flatter. "This isn't about me being right. It's about me being responsible." He said it like a robot. The older relatives laughed the hardest, which somehow hurt more. I looked around and watched who laughed, who looked down, who pretended to take a sip of iced tea to avoid choosing a side. Uncle Walt stopped chewing when Derek said badge. He just froze for a second, eyes narrowing like something in the air had shifted. I heard myself speak before I thought it through. What's the nearest paved access to Highway 6 from here? Derek blinked. What? He asked. I shrugged lightly. Just curious, I said. He laughed like I'd asked where the nearest library was during a tornado. But over the laughter, I heard it. A distant sound. Low. Wrong for a neighborhood Saturday. And for the first time all day, Derek's smile didn't land clean. It flickered, just for a second, like he felt it too.
If your own family trained you to stay silent, how long would it take before silence starts feeling like betrayal?
The sound didn't get louder, but my body reacted like it recognized it. My shoulders went tight. My eyes went to the tree line and then to the road without me deciding to. I hated that part of myself sometimes. The way training sticks to you even when you are just trying to eat potato salad and survive your own family. I turned away from Derek's circle of chairs and walked toward the side porch, like I was just going to grab another drink. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked if I was okay. They rarely did. I pulled my phone out again and opened the thread. My thumb hovered for half a second. Then I hit call. The line connected on the second ring. Greer, a man's voice answered. No greeting, no small talk. I kept my voice low and flat. I'm at a civilian gathering in Ashland, I said. I received TFR pending, an advance arriving. Confirm. There was a pause, the kind that means someone is looking at a screen. I stared at the sky. The clouds had thickened in a way most people would call pretty. I called it information. Ceilings dropping, I said quietly. Wind cross. Another pause. Confirmed, the voice said. Temporary flight restriction will activate. Advance is moving toward Epley Corridor. Stand by. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. I already knew what the words meant. The world had just shifted from backyard jokes to operational consequences. I ended the call and stayed on the porch for one more breath, letting my heartbeat settle into something usable. Then I walked back into the yard. Derek was mid-sentence, still performing. Mom was still smiling. The burgers were still smoking. And I was suddenly carrying something invisible that none of them understood. I stopped near the cooler and said it as calmly as I could. I need 10 minutes. No questions. Every head turned. Derek's eyebrows lifted. 10 minutes for what? He said, drawing the words out like I was being dramatic. Mom's smile tightened. Greer, don't start, she murmured, already trying to shrink me back down. I didn't answer them. I didn't correct him. I looked past Derek and scanned the road again. I spoke to my phone like it was a coworker, not a device. Ops is standing up a sterile corridor, I said, more to myself than to them. Derek laughed. A what corridor? He asked, and a couple of cousins laughed with him because they assumed it was nonsense. We're going to see a NOTAM in minutes, I added. That word landed differently. Uncle Walt's head lifted. His chewing stopped again. He looked at me like he was hearing a language he hadn't expected to hear in this backyard. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. A second message, shorter, colder. Expect resistance from civilians. You may need a local compliance anchor. For a moment, I felt a strange, bitter humor rise in my chest. Of course. Of course the system assumed civilians would resist. Of course it assumed someone would try to make it about ego instead of safety. I could already see it happening. Derek would treat this like a stage. Mom would treat it like an inconvenience. Everyone else would follow whoever sounded most confident. And then the record would show one thing, that the nearest qualified person was present and did not maintain compliance. That person was me. My hands stopped shaking. That part surprised me. My stomach did not. I looked up and my eyes found Derek automatically, like the message had put a target on him. He was still smirking, still waiting for me to explain myself so he could make it into a joke. And I realized something that made my mouth go dry. The danger here was not violence. It was procedure. It was what happens when people refuse to cooperate and the world stops treating them like family.
When responsibility finds you on your day off, do you step up quietly or resent the people who never notice?
I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Something in me had already switched from daughter to duty, and it made my words come out clean and simple. I stepped closer to the center of the yard, where everyone could hear me, and said, "I need everyone inside. Now. No one stands by the front gate. Keep the driveway clear. Do not gather near the road." The yard went quiet for half a second, the way it does when people are deciding whether to take you seriously. Derek made the decision for them. He laughed loudly, as if he was doing everyone a favor by turning my sentence into entertainment. "Look at her," he announced. "Hall monitor energy." A couple of cousins snorted. Derek leaned back in his chair and spread his hands. "She's about to write us a ticket for standing on grass," he said. More laughter. Mom stepped forward like she was calming a child, but her eyes were sharp. "Greer, don't make this about you," she said. And it hit me the way her words always did. Not like a slap, like a hand on your shoulder, pushing you back into your place. I felt the old reflex rise, the one that says, "Keep the peace, keep the peace, keep the peace." Then my phone buzzed again. I didn't even look. I didn't correct him. I turned and walked toward the driveway. If they wanted to treat me like a joke, fine. But I was not going to let their joke become a record. The air felt different now. The wind had steadied. The distant sound was closer, still low, still wrong. I stood near the edge of the property and watched the road. That was when a white pickup with an amber light bar turned onto the street and slowed in front of the house. A man stepped out, wearing a reflective vest and carrying a radio, like it belonged there. He didn't look confused. He looked focused. He scanned the property once, then walked straight toward me. Not toward Derek, not toward Mom, not toward the loudest group. He stopped a few feet away and said, clear as a bell, "Ma'am? Greer?" The word ma'am landed in the yard like a stone in water. Conversations stopped. Derek's smile froze in midair. The man raised his voice just enough so everyone could hear without it becoming a scene. "We're on the clock," he said. "Advance needs your confirmation." I watched Derek's face shift, the way it does when someone realizes the room has changed and they are no longer in charge of it. Mom's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Uncle Walt stood up slowly, like he was trying to see better. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize for ruining the vibe. I simply stepped closer to the man and asked, "What's the corridor line? Who owns traffic control on County Road 31? The man didn't blink. He answered immediately. "You do," he said, "until they arrive." I felt a strange, quiet weight settle in my chest. Not pride, not victory, just responsibility becoming real in front of witnesses. Behind me, Derek let out a short laugh that didn't sound like confidence anymore. "This is insane," he muttered, but nobody joined him. Mom's eyes were on me, and for the first time, I couldn't tell if she looked relieved or terrified. The man in the vest, Rick, kept his radio near his mouth, listening to something I couldn't hear. I watched the driveway, the gate, the road. I repeated, more firmly now, "Everyone inside, please." Some people moved, not because they respected me, but because the presence of a stranger in a reflective vest made it feel official. That was the first time my family saw it. The world outside our little story was looking for me, not for Derek. I heard tires on gravel. A black vehicle rolled up and stopped at the curb without a siren, without a flash, without drama. The engine shut off. A man stepped out wearing plain clothes that still somehow looked like a uniform. He scanned the yard in one smooth motion, eyes moving like he was counting exits. Then he spoke, calm and flat, the way serious people speak when they do not have time for feelings. "We need cooperation," he said. "Now."
Have you ever watched someone's confidence collapse the moment they realize the world doesn't revolve around them anymore?
The man didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask whose house it was. He didn't care who brought the potato salad. He stood at the edge of the driveway like the yard had become a problem that needed solving, not a family gathering that needed comforting. Rick shifted slightly beside me, radio up, eyes flicking between the road and the agent. My relatives were clustered in the grass behind us, half inside, half outside, frozen in that awkward space where curiosity fights with fear. Derek was still seated, but his posture had changed. His shoulders were stiff, his smile too sharp, like he was trying to force the moment back into his control. The agent looked directly at me. His voice was calm, clipped, and somehow louder than Derek without being loud at all. "Officer Greer," he said, "confirm route integrity." The word officer landed hard. It was not a compliment. It was a designation. It was the world naming me in a way my family never had. I felt every eye turn. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't look at Mom. I kept my gaze on the driveway, the gate, the line of sight to the road. "Route is clear," I said. "No crowd at the gate. Driveway will remain sterile." The agent nodded once, like a box had been checked. He turned his head slightly and spoke into his own radio, low and fast. Derek stood up. He could not help himself. He walked forward with that practiced swagger, the one that had always worked in this yard, in this family, in this little world where he was the golden child and I was the quiet one. "Hey," Derek said, smiling too wide. "I'm the homeowner's family. Tell me what's happening." He gestured behind him, as if the whole reunion was his responsibility. The agent didn't even look impressed. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He just turned his eyes to Derek and said, flat as concrete, "Sir, step back." Derek blinked. For a second, he looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't process a world where his tone didn't automatically become the tone everyone else used. He laughed once, a short, nervous laugh. "Come on," he said. "We're just having a reunion. She's making it weird." He pointed at me. "She loves rules. That's her whole personality." A few people behind him chuckled, but it died quickly. The yard had changed. The laughter didn't fit anymore. I stayed still. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. I watched the fence line. I watched the neighbor's driveway. I watched the county road. The agent stepped closer to me and spoke quietly, not as a secret, but as information. "TFR will go active in minutes," he said. "We need no movement on the corridor." I nodded. "Understood," I said. I looked at Rick. "Any traffic on County Road 31? Rick shook his head. "We're holding," he said. "Deputy is staged 2 blocks down." Derek scoffed loudly. "Deputy," he repeated, like it was ridiculous. Mom stepped forward and tried to smile. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, voice soft like she was smoothing a wrinkle. "Greer, honey, why are you doing this?" Her eyes were on me, but the message was for the room. Don't let her become important. Don't let her change the story. I swallowed. My heart was steady. My stomach was not. I turned slightly toward the group, just enough to be heard, and said the next part as calmly as I could. "You're going to lose cell service for a bit," I told them. "Don't panic." The words sounded absurd in a backyard. People stared at me like I was predicting an eclipse. A teenage cousin immediately checked his phone. "What?" he said. "Why?" Derek threw his hands up. "See," he said, "she's doing the government thing again, making everything dramatic." Uncle Walt's head snapped toward Derek. He didn't speak, but his jaw tightened. I could see it. That veteran look. The one that says, "This is not a game." The agent lifted his eyes to the group and spoke, still calm. "Everyone inside," he said. "Windows closed. Do not approach the road." A few people moved quickly now, not because they liked me, because they believed him. Mom stayed rooted, her face pale under her makeup. Derek looked around and realized, too late, that his usual audience was leaving. That was the first crack. He took a step toward me again. "Greer," he said, voice sharp now. "What did you tell them? What is this?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I didn't tell them anything," I said. "I received an alert. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do." Derek scoffed. "You're supposed to do paperwork," he snapped, "not run the neighborhood." The agent's head turned slightly like a sensor. He looked at Derek again. "Sir," he said, still even, "step back." Derek's face flushed. He looked at Mom, expecting backup. Mom's mouth opened. No sound came out. I felt something inside me tighten, not with triumph, but with a kind of grief. 12 years of being reduced to a joke, and now the world was correcting it in front of witnesses, and it didn't feel good. It felt heavy. Uncle Walt stepped closer, not to intervene, but to watch. His eyes were on me now, different, respectful, curious, like he was finally seeing what had been there all along. Derek tried one more time to regain control. "She's making this about being right," he said to the group, voice rising. I turned my head just enough to meet the air between us, not his eyes. And I said the line that I knew would land with anyone who had ever worn a uniform or worked a job where mistakes have consequences. "This isn't about me being right," I said. "It's about me being responsible." The yard went quiet. Even Derek didn't have a joke for that. The agent stepped closer to me, just enough that only I could hear him, but close enough that the tension was visible. "If your brother interferes again," he said softly, "we'll document it, and it won't be family anymore." My throat went dry. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't correct him. I just watched the road and realized the next part of the story was no longer ours to control.
If an outsider finally took you seriously, would you feel relief or grief for every year your family didn't?
Derek did the one thing the agent's message had predicted. He resisted. Not with violence, not with anything dramatic enough to feel like a movie. He resisted the way entitled civilians resist, with ego and phone calls and the belief that being loud counts as authority. He backed away like he was complying, then turned toward the patio and pulled his phone out with a smirk that tried to come back to life. "This is my aunt's house," he said, half to me, half to the yard. "I'm not letting some random guy tell my family to hide inside like we're criminals." Mom's head snapped toward him. "Derek," she whispered, but it wasn't a warning. It was encouragement, wrapped in fear. He stepped a few feet away, still within earshot, and started tapping. I watched him from the corner of my eye because in my world, the dangerous thing is not the person who is openly angry. It is the person who thinks rules are optional. Derek put the phone to his ear and said, loud enough for the agent to hear, "Hey, it's me. Yeah, listen, I need a favor. Can you call someone at the county? They've got some kind of operation happening at our reunion." He paused, then laughed. "No, I'm serious. I think my sister called it in. That last line was meant to sting. It did, but not the way he thought. It made something cold settle in my stomach. He ended the call and immediately dialed another number. "Tom," he said, voice bright. "You still doing reserve deputy stuff? Great. I need you to swing by. Something weird is going on, and these guys are acting like they own the road." He paced as he spoke, like a man performing leadership. The problem was, every call he made pulled more civilians toward the corridor. Within minutes, I saw a neighbor step onto their porch, then another. A pickup slowed on the road. Someone's kid rode a bike toward the end of the driveway. Derek's little rebellion was becoming a crowd. Rick's radio crackled. The agent's posture changed. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply turned his head and watched the growing movement like it was a measurement. Then he looked at me. "Non-compliance is forming," he said quietly. My mouth went dry. I stepped forward and said, firm now, "Everyone inside. Please, this is not a show." Derek heard me and scoffed. "Oh my God," he said. "She's loving this." The agent lifted his hand slightly, not as a threat, but as a signal. Rick moved closer. The agent took out a small notepad. Not a phone, not a tablet, a plain, boring notepad. He looked at Derek. "Sir," he said, "who did you call?" Derek blinked. "What?" he snapped. "Nobody. I'm just trying to help." The agent didn't argue. He asked again. "Who did you call?" Derek lifted his chin. "Why do you need to know that?" he demanded. The agent's pen hovered over the page. "Because we are documenting all contacts that could compromise route integrity," he said. The word documenting landed like a weight. Derek's confidence faltered. He laughed again, but it came out thin. "You're writing my name down," he said, half incredulous, half scared. "Why are you writing that down?" I looked at Derek then, not with anger, but with a tired kind of clarity. I kept my voice low, almost conversational, and let the sarcasm sit right on the edge of it. "Because in my world," I said, "feelings don't matter. Notes do." The yard went quieter. Mom's eyes flashed. She stepped toward me like she was protecting Derek from something I was doing on purpose. "Why do you always bring trouble back here?" she hissed. Not loud enough for the whole neighborhood, but loud enough for the people closest to hear. The words hit me like they always did. You are the problem, not the person who created the mess. I swallowed. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. Inside my head, the sentence formed anyway, clean and bitter. I'm not bringing trouble. I'm bringing the truth, the agent wrote. Derek's name, 2 phone numbers, a county contact, a reserve deputy friend, a neighbor who had walked closer. Each line was a record. Each line was a consequence Derek could not charm his way out of later. Derek's face drained of color as he realized what he had done. This was no longer a joke he could walk away from. It was a file. It was an incident. It was something that would exist after the burgers cooled and the folding chairs were put away. Derek took a step back, eyes darting to Mom, then to me, and for the first time all day, he looked like a man who had run out of words. The agent closed the notepad and said, calm as ever, "We need a statement from Derek. Now." Derek's eyes snapped to mine, and the look on his face was not smug. It was pleading.
When someone who mocked you suddenly needs your credibility, do you offer grace or finally protect your own boundaries?
Derek opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, like his usual charm had finally met something it could not bend. The agent didn't wait for him to find a better tone. He angled his body slightly, keeping Derek in view, and said, State your name. Confirm you contacted county personnel and a reserve deputy. Confirm you understand this corridor is active. Derek's throat bobbed. Mom stepped forward instinctively, as if she could smooth this over with a smile and a gentle voice. He was just trying to help, she said. The agent did not look at her. He looked at Derek. Derek glanced at me again, that same pleading look, like I could translate him out of consequences. I didn't. I kept my face neutral and my eyes on the driveway. Derek Harlan, Derek finally said. I called someone at the county. I called a friend. I didn't know. The agent nodded once. He wrote nothing this time. He simply said, "You've been advised. Do not contact anyone else. Do not approach the road." Derek nodded too quickly. "Fine," he muttered. "Fine." Rick's radio crackled again, sharper now, more frequent. The agent's own radio answered in clipped bursts. I caught fragments. Corridor active. Hold. Confirm line. My phone buzzed with a new update. TFR active. I felt it before I read it, like the air had tightened. The agent turned to me. "We need full compliance," he said. "Everyone inside. Curtains drawn." That was the moment the reunion stopped being a reunion. It became a contained space inside an operation. I turned toward my family and raised my voice just enough to be heard without sounding like I was performing. "Inside," I said. "Now. Please." This time, people moved. They didn't argue. They didn't laugh. They gathered plates and cups like the world had suddenly become fragile. Aunt Connie looked dazed, like someone had picked up her backyard and placed it inside a different reality. Cousins filed into the house. Someone pulled the sliding door shut. Mom lingered at the threshold, eyes still on Derek, still trying to keep him from looking small. Derek stood frozen in the yard, jaw clenched, as if he couldn't accept that his own mouth had created this. I stepped closer to him and said quietly, "Go inside." He stared at me. "You love this," he whispered, venom and fear mixed together. I didn't correct him. I just repeated, "Go inside." He finally turned and walked toward the door, shoulders stiff, like he was marching into a courtroom. The agent positioned himself near the gate. Rick moved to the edge of the driveway with his radio. A local patrol car rolled slowly past the end of the street and stopped at the intersection, lights off, presence loud anyway. Everything was controlled without anyone raising their voice. That was the part that always unsettled civilians. They expect drama. What they get is procedure. Inside the house, the blinds came down. The curtains were pulled. People stood shoulder to shoulder in Aunt Connie's living room, staring through narrow slats like kids during a storm. I stayed outside with Rick and the agent because the nearest qualified person does not get to hide. The corridor line was close enough that I could feel the tension in the air, like a string pulled tight. Then the sound arrived in full. Not a scream, not a cinematic roar, a heavy, layered vibration that made the leaves tremble and the ground feel slightly alive under my boots. The kind of sound that makes conversations stop mid-sentence. The kind of sound that makes your body straighten before your mind decides to. Somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the highway, beyond the ordinary map of this town, an aircraft moved through the sky on a path that had nothing to do with us and everything to do with why we were being treated like a problem to solve. The living room behind me went silent. I could feel it through the glass. No one joked. No one whispered. Derek did not speak at all. Mom stood near the window, one hand pressed to her chest like she was trying to keep her heart from falling out. Uncle Walt stood behind her, spine straight, chin lifted, eyes fixed forward. He looked different now. Not confused, not impressed. Recognizing. Like something in him had found its old language. The vibration deepened, then faded, then deepened again as the aircraft moved along its approach line. Rick's radio crackled. "Down," someone said. Another voice answered, "Down and secure." The agent's shoulders loosened by a fraction. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady. My stomach was still tight. A few minutes later, another vehicle pulled up, larger, more official. The driver stayed inside. A man stepped out from the passenger side, older than the first agent, posture even more controlled. He walked toward the gate with the calm of someone who has been doing this for a long time. He stopped near me and Rick and looked directly at me. "Officer Greer," he said. His voice carried just enough that the people inside could hear through the door. "You maintained corridor compliance. That's why the aircraft is down safely." The words hit like a gavel. Not because they were dramatic, because they were plain, because they were true. Uncle Walt opened the front door slightly, just enough to see. He didn't speak. He simply stood taller, the way veterans do when they hear competence being recognized. Derek stood behind him, face pale, eyes wide, like his identity had been unplugged. All his life, Derek had been the important one, the leader, the golden child, the one the room listened to. And now, in front of everyone, the world had named me as the decision point, without me ever asking for it. Respect hits different when it comes from people who do not owe you love. The man turned slightly and spoke into his radio. I caught the phrase as it passed through the air, quick and technical, and it sent a quiet shock through the living room. "Greer, CRG certification confirmed," the voice said. "Handoff accepted." Derek didn't know what CRG meant. Mom didn't know. Most of my cousins didn't know. But they all heard the same thing anyway. This was not a cute little government job. This was real.
If the truth finally showed itself in public, would you enjoy the silence or mourn how hard it was to earn?
The corridor cleared as quickly as it had formed. Radios quieted. Vehicles rolled away with the same calm discipline they had arrived with. The yard was left in a strange, hollow silence, like a stage after the lights go out. Inside the house, my family stood around the living room in small clusters, not sure whether to talk about what had happened or pretend it had not happened at all. Aunt Connie started stacking paper plates with trembling hands. Someone turned the air conditioner down like cold air could fix humiliation. Derek stayed quiet for exactly 3 minutes. That might have been a personal record. Then he found me near the back hallway, away from the windows, where the noise of the yard could not reach. He grabbed my elbow lightly and pulled me toward the laundry room like we were sharing a secret. His voice dropped into a whisper, urgent and thin. "Greer," he said, "tell them I didn't mean it. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at his hand on my arm. He let go quickly, like he remembered too late that touching me was not a privilege he had earned. "They wrote my name down," he whispered. "You saw that. You saw him writing." His eyes were wide, the way they get when a person finally realizes consequences are real. "Just tell them I was trying to help. Tell them I didn't know." I stared at him for a moment and felt something in me settle. Not anger, not triumph. A quiet kind of exhaustion. Derek had mocked me for years because he thought my life was small. Now, he needed my life to be big enough to save him. Before I could answer, Mom appeared in the hallway like she had been waiting for this. Her face was tight, but her voice was soft, almost pleading. "He's your brother," she said. "Don't ruin his life." That sentence hit me harder than Derek's whisper, because it told me everything. Derek humiliates me in public, and it is a joke. The system documents Derek, and it is suddenly my responsibility to protect him. I took one slow breath. I kept my voice even. "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "I'm refusing to lie." Derek's jaw clenched. "You always do this," he hissed. "You always act like you're above us." I almost laughed at that, but I didn't. I wasn't above them. I had just finally stopped crawling. Mom's eyes flashed. "Greer," she said, sharper now. "This family is all we have." I looked at her and felt the old grief rise. The family she meant was Derek. I was the support staff, the quiet one, the one who cleaned plates and checked thermostats and kept the peace. Derek leaned in again, voice shaking. "You don't understand," he said. "I have a deal in motion, a real deal. They run checks. If they see an incident, if they see non-compliance, they'll pull it. I cannot have this on record." I watched his face as he said it, and I realized what scared him most was not guilt. It was reputation. It was the loss of the privilege of being assumed decent. Not everyone gets punished. Some people just lose the benefit of the doubt. Derek had lived on that benefit his whole life. He had spent years turning me into a joke, so nobody would look too closely at him. Now the world had looked at him for 5 minutes and written him down. I didn't say anything else. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't threaten him. I simply stood there and let the silence do what my family had always used it to do. Except this time, it was not for them. It was for me. Derek swallowed hard. His voice cracked on the next sentence, and it sounded like the truth escaping before he could stop it. "I mocked you," he said, staring at the floor, "because I couldn't stand that you didn't need us." I felt the words land in my chest like a dull blade. I didn't respond. I didn't correct him. I just stood there, and that silence was the final cut.
If your family asked you to protect the person who hurt you, would you stay loyal or stay honest?
After the radios disappeared and the last official vehicle rolled out of sight, the reunion tried to restart itself like a paused song. Someone turned the grill back on. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke that was not funny. Aunt Connie kept wiping the same countertop. But the yard never fully recovered. It felt like the air had been rearranged. I stepped out the back door and stood alone on the patio for a minute, letting the quiet settle. The folding chairs creaked as people moved them. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. The smell of grilled meat hung in the air, but it had gone flat, like smoke after the fire is out. I watched the grass where Derek had been sitting, where he had performed his version of me like it was harmless. Now the chairs were empty. The cornhole boards sat untouched. Even the flag and the flower bed looked tired. Someone, I never even saw who, had left a mug on the patio table. It was one of those novelty mugs with bright letters that were supposed to be funny. "World's Best Brother." I picked it up without thinking and took a sip. The coffee inside was cold, bitter, and stale. I swallowed anyway. I did not react. That felt like the most honest part of the day. Inside, voices rose and fell, trying to pretend the story had not changed. Then Mom stepped out onto the patio. She stood beside me, close enough to feel like family, far enough to feel like distance. She stared at the yard and said quietly, "I didn't know." I looked at her. Her face was tired in a way I had never noticed before, like favoritism takes energy too. I kept my voice gentle. "You didn't ask," I said. She flinched, just slightly, not because I was cruel, because I was accurate. We stood there for a moment, listening to the insects and the soft clatter of chairs. I thought about Derek's whisper in the hallway. "I mocked you because I couldn't stand that you didn't need us." I thought about how
If being seen came with grief, would you still choose it or keep the peace by staying invisible?